In the spring of 2026, a massive military conflict between the United States and Iran concluded in exactly 10 weeks. This rapid timeline stands in sharp relief against the preceding 50 years, where decades of American coercive diplomacy consistently failed to force a resolution. The breakthrough did not happen in Washington or Tehran. The locus of diplomatic power shifted to Islamabad, and it was quietly supported by secondary diplomatic backchannels operating out of Geneva. This new channel succeeded by strictly abandoning standard Western deterrence models, relying entirely on the leverage of long-term relational capital. Strategist Atiq Rahman documents the mechanics of this shift in his text, The Reordering. Rahman grounds his analysis in two frameworks: Barry Buzan's regional security complex theory and the Mearsheimer-Rosato rationality thesis. These frameworks suggest the 2026 war was the rational, mathematical outcome of an order already fracturing along several specific points of institutional collapse. This is an animated timeline mapping the crisis. To understand how the conflict was resolved, we must read the history deliberately in reverse, starting from the signed accord and tracking backward to the structural collapse. Forecasting the future of global conflict requires abandoning linear assumptions. Analysts have to reverse engineer how fragile peace is constructed in the immediate aftermath of systemic failure. Our first point of analysis on this reverse timeline is the immediate resolution document itself, the Islamabad Memorandum. The memorandum secured a ceasefire through a highly complex, interlocking structure of 14 specific clauses. Pakistani mediators anchored these clauses using a specific diplomatic instrument. They designed a mutually useful ambiguity that allowed competing parties to claim quiet victories without forcing public concessions. Moving backward from the signing, we arrive at the crisis's most fragile phase, the immediate hours following the ceasefire announcement. It is here that standard Western diplomatic playbooks encounter a severe conceptual error regarding multipolar negotiations. The error lies in the assumption that extreme brinkmanship is simply an aggressive strategy to secure better terms at the negotiating table. When multiple actors actually benefit from a failed peace process, brinkmanship serves a completely different purpose. It becomes a precise, calculated instrument for deliberate sabotage. This matrix compares diplomatic bargaining with saboteur calculus. Model A maps brinkmanship as a negotiation tactic, while Model B frames it explicitly for sabotage. In Model B, the mathematical reward for generating diplomatic fog far outweighs any reward for compliance. When a peace agreement threatens an actor's institutional survival, treating their aggression as a plea for better terms guarantees the sabotage of the entire accord. Applying this game theory framework to 2026 reveals the specific geopolitical actors mathematically incentivized to break the Islamabad Memorandum. The primary internal saboteur was Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The IRGC acted on institutional survival. For their leadership, the war's continuation provided a necessary shield against internal collapse, overriding the diplomatic goals of the state. Externally, the primary regional saboteur was Israel. Israel's motivation to generate diplomatic fog stemmed from an unresolved, compounding strategic dilemma regarding the Lebanese border, which required continued regional distraction to manage. Finally, the primary systemic saboteur was China. Beijing employed a macro strategy of quiet positioning. They allowed regional actors to absorb the heavy economic and military costs of the war, while positioning themselves to reap the resulting geopolitical benefits as the least costly beneficiary. Despite lacking any formal alliance, these three disparate actors unintentionally collaborated to flood the fragile diplomatic channel with static and interference. Rationality in statecraft does not inherently lead toward peace. For organizations facing existential or strategic threats, continued regional chaos is a mathematically sound objective. We now push the timeline backward a final time, moving past the immediate ceasefire to examine the 15-year structural deterioration that preceded the war. The Mearsheimer-Rosato rationality thesis proves that the ensuing war was an expected systemic output. It was an inevitable calculation based on the state of the board. This map applies Barry Buzan's regional security complex theory to the Middle East and South Asia, illustrating the strict security interdependence between the region's states. Over 15 years, 5 accelerants, ranging from the collapse of regional security treaties to the failure of global AI governance, applied compounding pressure to these interconnected nodes. These structural failures converged on a single geographic choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. The strait acted as the ultimate litmus test. It was the physical location where years of abstract institutional erosion finally translated into kinetic conflict. Because the global security architecture had become too rigid to adapt to these 5 simultaneous failures, the system could no longer flex. It reached a point where a shattering conflict was the only remaining systemic outlet. Playing the timeline forward at high speed reveals a completely unbroken logical line, from the 15-year systemic collapse, through the physical bottleneck of the Strait of Hormuz, past the deliberate interference of the saboteurs, and landing directly on the 14 clauses of the Islamabad Memorandum. The defining lesson of Rahman's text is clear. Pakistan successfully mediated the peace strictly by refusing to engage with the deliberate fog generated by rational saboteurs. This dismantling followed a series of precise, calculated fault lines. Clinging to standard deterrence models in an environment defined by active, rational sabotage is now a strategic dead end for modern diplomats. Rahman's analysis offers neither triumphalism nor despair. It is strictly a structural accounting of the geopolitics of 2026. Analysts must now identify exactly which geopolitical rules are being rewritten and map exactly who is rewriting them. True strategic forecasting requires accepting that the global order is already being reordered. Survival depends entirely on understanding the precise, rational cost of that change.